Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling to order the December 6th, I can't believe it's December already, meeting of the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee on Arts and Nonprofits. Thank you all for being here. We do have a quorum today. So the first thing on our agenda to approve, I'm going to let Stephanie in. The first thing on our agenda today is to approve the meeting minutes of October 18th, November 1st, and November 15th. So is there any one of those sets of minutes that anyone wants to pull out to make any changes to or adjustments to?
We approve.
All right, Larry's made a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Jason. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are unanimously approved. Thank you very much. So we have a rather full agenda today. I can go back to that. We're going to talk a little bit about the year-end report for City Council. I circulated some information via email prior to this meeting. Then we'll have a quick marketing update and after Arts and Economic Prosperity study update. Then we do have some time for public comment or anything added to the agenda after that. But let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen so that people at home can see this presentation. So let me just do this. All right. Barbara, are you able to see that okay at home? I cannot see you for some reason at the moment.
Yes, it's fine, Russ.
All right, excellent. If you are on the call, I believe right now it's only Stephanie and Barbara. You're going to have to speak up if you want to chime in because I do not have you on my screen at the moment. So just be aware, I can only hear you, I can't see you. So I just want to quickly go through a few things for our year-end report. We're going to make a presentation to the City Council 2 weeks from today on Monday, December 20th. I'm going to rely on Nancy to help Barbara and I make sure that we have everything in order and in line to be on the agenda that night. But we're putting together a year-end report that we're going to want committee input on. Some input today, some input via email, obviously, because our next meeting is on the 20th, so we will not have time at that meeting to approve anything that goes into the year-end report. Let's see if I can scroll through this. So last week, I sent out a survey based on some of the questions that we had circulated amongst each other as a group. We've gotten several more responses in since I was able to put together this summary. So we do have responses from other arts organizations in the community that are getting added to this. I believe I sent it out to everyone that was on the list that Robin shared with us for the Atlas study. Everyone that was Portsmouth based. I did not send it to organizations that have addresses outside of Portsmouth. I only sent it organizations that had addresses that were inside of Portsmouth. And so far, these are the organizations that replied, the 11 organizations that had replied when I did this summary report. And I just wanted to give everyone a sense of where we are. We had done a survey that Tina led the effort on way back in the spring or even late winter last year. And I still have all the data from that survey that will be incorporated into the year-end report. So we'll be able to compare what the community said, both the nonprofits and the general community said to us back in the early part of 2021 with what the arts organizations are saying to us now. So it was kind of some interesting results here, and I just want to go through them quickly, get any questions or comments from the people of the committee, and then talk about the year-end report. So the first question we asked was, when compared to January of 2021, that's January of this year, is their organization in a better financial position, the same financial position, or a worse financial position today? Now, the way we were determining this was there was a slider that they could slide back and forth to answer the question. They slid it all the way to the worst possible scenario compared to January. It went down to like a 0. And if they were so much better, it would go up to 100. And if they left it in the middle at 50, it just meant they were the same as last January economically. And the average of the 11 responses came back remarkably at 53. So just about the same, if not slightly better. So I did want to pull out the lowest three numbers that came out of this and the highest three numbers that came out of this, just to show people that it wasn't that everyone feels the same. It's all over the map. So, you know, there are organizations that have been unbelievably impacted by this and feel that today their position is immeasurably worse than it was just in January. And there are some organizations that are in a better financial fiscal position than they were in January, 2 of them giving 100% as their response. So I took that information and we asked them to clarify, and I picked out a few representative examples of what responses were as far as the primary factors that caused their organization's financial position to change since January, whether positive, negative, or staying the same this year. So an example of a negative, they gave a 27, not able to reach capacity with primary event, which doubles as their key fundraiser. No further COVID-related assistance from state or federal government. So they're feeling that at this point in December or late November, when they filled this out, that the no longer having assistance from the government. Last January, everyone had received their government assistance. So a lot of organizations were pretty flush last January. A positive one is we've been fortunate to receive state and federal grants, as well as private support. We are open for productions although only about 50% houses. We are doing some limited programming online, but it's not high income, but they're in a better financial position than they were in January. One person said PPP loans, the New Hampshire Nonprofit Emergency Relief Fund grant, wonderful support from our members and supporters, and the insistence of the board and executive director of establishing and funding a substantial cash reserve has them in a better financial position. So this is an organization that has really reacted to the pandemic in a way to secure future safety for the organization and feel they're in a better position than they were in January. One that's in a very extremely negative position compared to last January says their primary source of income is live concerts and also CD sales at concerts. They've not been able to have a live concert since 2019 due to COVID. This is part of the story that we're seeing in a lot of arts and culture organizations, is that their business model has been ground to a halt due to the pandemic. One group said decreased individual donations have occurred since January. And another positive one is that federal grants and COVID relief support had a positive impact. So to summarize, the most mentioned contributing factors to improved fiscal health were federal aid, including the PPP loans and the CARES Act grants, and increased donor support. There weren't any instances of people saying, people are coming out in droves and participating in our programs and spending money at our organizations. That's why we're financially healthy. It's really a reliance on pandemic assistance and increased donor support in reaction to the pandemic. It's a positive for our community that donors are coming to the rescue. I don't know that it's a sustainable practice for organizations in our community, particularly arts organizations. The most mentioned comments or contributing factors to diminished fiscal health over the past year is a decrease in audience and program participants due to the pandemic. So no real surprises here. These are the themes that came across in all of the respondents. As we continue to gather more responses, we'll probably see these themes enumerated. The next question, I question whether everyone read the question thoroughly enough. I might have to do some follow-up with some of the organizations. They've been kind enough to provide who they are and who filled out the form. So if I have questions, I can go and follow-up questions. But this one asked compared to calendar year 2019. And I'm worried that some of the respondents may have read it as compared to January 2021, like the first question. But anyway, I was asking compared to calendar year 2019, which is the most recent calendar year that we had, essentially a pre-pandemic year, compared to this current year that we're in. Are your programs and services you're providing reaching more constituents, the same number of constituents, or fewer constituents or audience members? Again, very close to the same, just slightly worse. 11 responses. And again, all over the map, though we didn't have the hundreds that we had in the financial health, the highest responses were 2 organizations that had 85, where 50 would be the same. And we had an organization that said a 1 out of 100, with 50 being the same and 1 being significantly worse. So this one was definitely weighted towards lower participation in programs. And the responses that the factors that they cited were decreased due to COVID concerns in our older population, particularly group programs, accessibility of online programs, ingenuity and creativity of the staff in enhancing existing programs and developing new programs to fit remote and hybrid learning situations. This is an answer where I wonder if they're comparing it to January or 2019. But if organizations are able to utilize remote and hybrid learning and remote programming to increase their programming over what they were experiencing in 2019, I think that's very positive for that organization. Because we've built a loyal audience base over 36 years, we're expecting similar audience sizes at upcoming December concerts. That's an organization that hasn't been able to have concerts since 2019, and they're planning on a return to concerts this month. Still some hesitation for some return to large gatherings, even with COVID safety protocols. There's an overabundance in programming right now. For example, artists and venues come out of the gate at the same time, and 3 of our programming series have yet to return to business as usual due to the effects of the pandemic. So they're at a lower capacity than 2019. This one, the significant decrease, the primary cause for a decrease in audience members is the inability to have in-person concerts. Their venue has not been able to make any updates to circulation or cleaning. So that's a significant impact for an organization. Quality, production, increased marketing and word of mouth has slightly improved their reach. So the summary here is that the most mentioned contributing factors to improved audience reach is an increased need for services, online and remote offerings, and dedicated long-time audience. The most mentioned contributing factors to diminished audience reach is an unwillingness of audience members or program participants to return due to the ongoing pandemic. So no surprises there again. Question 5 was, what do you currently view as your organization's greatest obstacles or challenges to recovery from the pandemic of the past 20 months? Inability to produce large events, changing health conditions didn't allow for much, if any, long-term planning. Uncertainty, which leads to unexpected expenses as plans are haphazardly adapted to accommodate COVID demands. The pandemic is ongoing, everything is still uncertain. We're seeing a common thread here. There's no unified community or state leadership around public safety. Many people are still uncertain about the safety of attending live events, even if everyone's masked and proof of vaccine is required. Re-engaging schools, and specifically elementary and middle school classes in an effort to get them to participate in field trips to Portsmouth has been a challenge. Managing the daily realities of COVID or potential COVID illnesses with a smaller staff, quarantining, testing, time away from work, overall wellness. Access to rapid testing has been a major challenge. Again, having in-person concerts and also in-person rehearsals. We've been having online rehearsals since March of 2020. Raising sufficient funds to support increased programming. So these are all concerns that came out. Question 6 was, have COVID related safety precautions instituted by your organization for employees and constituents or audiences been effective? 8 of the respondents out of 11 answered yes, that they have been effective for a variety of reasons, including using personal protection equipment for music rehearsals and audiences. We had several performance ensembles respond to this, and they're all using PPE for their rehearsals and for their audiences. Utilizing outdoor space for events was a common theme, which we know is so impossible during the winter. And the positive nature of a lack of reported transmission viruses at events. That's been a common theme in responses. When I asked, have COVID safety precautions been effective, a lot of the responses said, we have no documented reported cases of transmission at our events or at our organization. So in that respect, I feel it's been positive. One respondent stated that there's been a lack of audience return, even with precautions. One respondent stated that protocols are out of their control because they use space that's not under their control, space that has been inaccessible. There was one non-applicable answer. Question 7. Are there any actions or programs the city can take to assist in your organization's pandemic recovery effort? 4 respondents encouraged the city to provide additional funding through their federal support, the ARPA funds. 3 respondents urged the city to endorse safety precautions at venues and improve access to vaccines. 3 respondents desire additional city support for marketing Portsmouth arts and culture attractions. And 1 stated with the purchase of community campus, offer reduced price programming space to local nonprofit organizations. Now, this was a non-prompted question. It was just asking what the city can do. We did not prompt them with anything about ARPA support. We did not prompt them with anything about safety precautions. We just said, what can the city do generally? And this is what came back. So that's it for the survey that we did. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Any surprises in that?
Russ,
Yes, go ahead, Barbara.
you know what I find interesting, sadly, is that one of the things that I know I had great hope for with the original survey that Tina led was that people were going to return with the vaccine. And so here we are, I think roughly about 7 or 8 months after that survey, and because people haven't been as willing to get the vaccine as we had hoped, sadly, those survey results are not proving to be true, because we still see this incredible reluctance to be in large groups indoors. So when I read through your, the way the number of us responded, I thought, boy, here we were thinking about 7 or 8 months ago, okay, this is what we need. This is what we need. And so I don't know how we can stress that enough to the city or to the state or to whoever. And Beth and I have been sitting in on conversations with the state culture, one of the state cultural groups, and it's the same there, not getting the consistent support for some of these things like vaccines or masks. And so everybody's left to their own resources.
Yes, that's a good point. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, and I think, at least for the New Hampshire Art Association, what we've seen is we did see people returning to the venue, but now we're seeing it drop off again because people are scared now of the new variant. And just in the last, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen a lot more reluctance to people to come into the gallery, people, for people to be indoors, even with the masks. And I'm talking about the vaccinated people, because they're just so concerned that the numbers are up. So I think it was accurate at the time, but maybe it's not, because other things, like you said, Barb, didn't happen. The masks and the vaccines didn't happen as universally as we would like. So here we are again.
Yeah, that's a good point. Other thoughts? My anecdotal personal experience has been that when I've attended events that have required proof of vaccination, the attendance has been significantly higher than when I've attended events that have not required proof of vaccination. And I think you're right, Renee. I think we're starting to see a slow shifting, a sort of wait and see attitude about the new variant that's happening right now, that even those who are vaccinated, there's uncertainty of whether or not that vaccination provides any sort of reliable immunity to the new variant, which is going to cause people to be hesitant. All right, so moving from that survey to the year-end report that we're going to present. Barbara and I had a meeting specifically about this. We've not written the full report yet. We are going to write a report, include it in the packet for the city council, and then present the report on December 20th. But I just wanted to get the whole committee up to speed that it's basically going to be a 3-part report with an introduction and summary of the purpose of this group, what we were charged with doing and asked to do by the mayor and the city council, and a summary of the work that we've done over the course of the year. The data from the surveys that we have, including the ones that Tina did and the most recent one, compiled in a way that's easy to digest and quick to understand. And then a series of recommendations from this group for the city. which is really our charge. We've been asked by the city, what can the city do to help arts, culture, nonprofits, recover as we emerge from the pandemic, which we're hoping we'd be much farther along in the emergence process at this point when we formed last year. So the proposed recommendations based on the conversations that we've been having over the past several months would be for the city to support the Americans for the Arts upcoming Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 study, including paid part-time staff support and the rollout of the study results. Now, the city has already supported the actual implementation of participation in the study. So the study is going forward. It doesn't commence until March of 2022. And there'll be a 12-month period in which the study takes place, but there's going to be support needed for this. And I think there's a strong argument to make with the city council that because there is not an entity such as ArtSpeak or anything like that in place right now, that the city has to be the main driver behind making sure that this happens, and that the Blue Ribbon Committee can help in the facilitation, but that there are missing pieces to making it happen effectively. Go ahead.
Russ, it's important to note that though March is the kickoff of the actual surveys, we've already been working on it. So
Yes.
January and February there's going to be things happening.
There's
Which
going to
we'll
be things
report on
happening.
lately, but I wouldn't want them to think that we can wait till March because it's now.
Definitely, totally.
So what is the cost to the city to participate in this?
Nancy can answer that.
We've already paid the $6,000. And then there's some auxiliary things that we signed up for. So I think we have a budget of about $7,000 or $8,000. Also, just so you know, Russ, I also did speak with the manager about and Robin about the budget that we put together for a part-time staff person. So I don't know if you mean part-time staff going forward beyond a couple of years.
No, I just mean
Yeah.
specifically for this project. So if there are things that are already covered,
So
that's okay.
that funding has been identified. We don't have a contract yet, but that's something that I hope to do before the end of the year. Right, before Robin leaves and puts
Yeah.
things in the hands of Renee.
We've identified a person who can fulfill this function, and right now, she's helping us and managing the spreadsheets and helping, but, we need to kind of pay her to do this because what she's only doing is surface stuff right now. So,
Well, my thought is that, the mayor asked us to explain how the city can help. And all we can do is make recommendations and make asks. And the city has to respond to our, or they don't have to respond, but that, it's in their court once we've made the recommendations or the asks in the city. And I think that this first bullet point is an item that could potentially be fine-tuned. But I know that if we're going to make a year-end report and just make a general big ask, a list of these are the things that our year of work has yielded, and we believe these are the steps that can be taken by the city, or the city can decide to take or not take to support the recovery of arts and culture in our community. I think things that have not yet been identified as coverable related to that study, I believe are important.
I agree, and I think that what I enumerated previously is just bare bones. There's a lot we can put out. A document digitally as well as physically on the results, which has happened in the past. There's a lot more that that could be done. This was just what we could scrape off from various accounts.
Oh, totally. And since the ball's already running on this, that we've committed to doing this, I think that in my mind, this is almost the most important ask of the city council right now, because it has a direct benefit to the city. It's information that the city can use going forward in master planning. It's information the city can use going forward in cultural planning. It's information that the city and all of the nonprofits basically that are struggling right now, and the arts and culture nonprofits can use going forward in helping their development efforts and really laying out for the business community as well the impact that this sector has on the economy, the local economy. It's been proven over and over again, and this is probably not a good time to skip rolling it out properly. So that's my thought on that. Any other comments on this before I go to the next bullet point? The next bullet point is another project that we've already begun, marketing Portsmouth as an arts and culture destination to aid in the economic recovery of both our arts organizations and also of the community as a whole, because we know from bullet point number 1 that when the arts do well in this community, the community does well. So this initial pilot program that we'll talk about a little bit later in the meeting, I think our year-end report should have an ask for either continuing that program or having a process in place for reviewing and determining whether or not it will be continued at some point down the line. And I don't know that we're going to be at a point yet where we can put an exact number on what the continuation of that program would be. I know we've talked about ballpark numbers of what a 3-year program would be, but I think that we heard in this survey, we've heard in previous surveys, and we've heard talking to arts organization leaders and amongst ourselves that anything that we can do to get a return to programming will have a direct positive economic benefit on the community and the economic benefit on the arts and cultural organizations that are struggling right now. And as it was shown in that survey I just reported on, that's the biggest challenge that people are facing, is getting a return of the audiences, of the constituents, of the participants in their programs and getting those up and going again. And one piece of that puzzle is audience confidence and audience awareness. And that's something that can be tackled through a marketing program that's beneficial to the community as a whole. Any comments on this one?
Are we going to go into a more detailed update on this one in a minute?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right,
We
I
have
think-
later in the agenda a
Great.
detailed update on where we are in the current marketing plan, but this is just an overview of, and this is the time really, as Barbara and I are going to sit down this week and hammer out this plan. This is a time for committee members to say, this shouldn't be as big a priority, this is an important priority, or we're happy with the way things are. Go ahead. Ben.
Did you want to consider changing the language just a little bit to be more of a funding of marketing? Because I don't think we have the city doing, but they're not.
Oh, that's a good point.
So,
Yeah, and actually, most of these are asks for funding to support these. The Americans for the Arts study is a little different in that I'm not exactly sure how that contract works out and how much the city plays a role in management of that actual process compared to this, but yeah, no, that's spot on. Any other thoughts on this one?
I would just add that it's an opportunity for a thank you for the pilot that's happening right now for the marketing piece.
Yep.
And then based on the results of that, the ask would be, to continue it, because we know that the recovery is going to take, longer than this year or this holiday, post-holiday season. Same for the American Performing Arts,
Yeah, no, this is really important.
Improvements, yeah.
And I think that a big part of that introduction summary statement is going to be an expression of gratitude for the city for taking this seriously, for gathering this group together, and for the support we've received today, and the ability to move forward on some of our initiatives already. So that's an excellent point.
So, Russ, I have a question, and we probably don't know it, but in terms of audience participation, from people coming from farther away, the question is, what are we doing to encourage a broader outreach in terms of, what steps have already been taken to address the COVID crisis? How many of our facilities have updated like their air intake, that people are requiring, proof of vaccination and so forth. And that we need, I think, to include that in any of the marketing that we're doing, so that they understand that, a lot of steps have been taken in response to the crisis. And I'm not sure that's clear here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think we'll get some clarity on that when Ben talks a little bit later in the meeting about the actual marketing efforts that's going on right now. I know that Beth has spoken to this a little bit, and she's on the call, and others have spoken to the challenge of doing a broad Portsmouth marketing campaign that's not specifically marketing any particular individual organization or event, and the differences from organization to organization and the way they're handling protocols can be a little bit challenging. The vaccination requirements, while they're frequent and common in the community at this point, they're not universal. And certain improvements that have been done to facilities we even saw in the survey are not universal. So it's figuring out how to message that properly. But I think we'll get to that when we get to the marketing portion of the agenda. But I think that's an excellent point, because we have to figure out what's the message that's going to be most effective in encouraging people to come back into our spaces. Both locally and regionally, yeah, too. And that's another thing that I struggle with, because you know, the bullet point talks about as an arts and culture destination, but I've always been a strong advocate of promoting the arts within our local community as well. And this is not just about bringing in people from outside of our community to participate in the arts, but it also should have a strong bent on addressing the people within our community, having them be supportive of what's happening here. So excellent points. The next bullet point is something that we've talked about briefly, but we haven't really dived into a lot. So I'm curious about people's reaction to this. But we've talked a little bit about the idea of city support for collaborative community projects led by the arts and culture organizations that this committee is to address to jumpstart the local creative economy in 2022 and 2023, possibly in connection with the Portsmouth 400 events that are going on. So I know we've had some informal conversations about whether or not groups of organizations can collaborate to put on citywide events that help re-engage our community and bring people into the community to engage in arts and culture, and possibly tying some of those and leveraging the fact that we are going to be having our 400th birthday in just over 12 months. And whether or not that's possible, whether or not there's any opportunity for the use of ARPA funds in particular for specific community-based projects that engage the community, that are designed to spark economic activity throughout our community, not necessarily even just in the nonprofit organizations, but things that are driven by local arts and nonprofit cultural organizations. Go ahead.
I think this is a really gray area because arts and culture is one of the Portsmouth 400 pillars.
Yeah.
So there's arts and culture and, you know, the maritime and this and that. So yeah, I think it's a little tricky making recommendations to the city to support the arts and culture when there's already involvement of Portsmouth 400 other pillars.
Yeah.
And not everybody can go to the city. So I think that's going to be a bit confusing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is the fix then just taking out the reference to Portsmouth 400? Because obviously I think we do want to continue with community projects. I think that's been something that's gotten people excited, even though we haven't made a lot of progress there. I think it's something I want to keep on.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's so much going on with Portsmouth 400, and of course they have an arts and culture committee, but this may be something that we do that eventually gets a Portsmouth 400, logo on it. But I think you're right, Jason. I think tying it at this point
That makes sense.
confusing.
I like this one. I think just wordsmithing a bit. I don't know that jumpstart is right,
Okay.
because it does feel like many organizations are already up and running again, but maybe to further fuel or to something that talks about to feed that local creative economy. A better word choice there might be considered.
Russ,
Yes, go ahead, Barbara.
I think to add on to what Tina said, and I don't really know how to say it, but and I don't want to sound too corny, but our newfound collaboration, because the fact of the matter is a lot of us have never worked together before. So one of the real positives coming out of a negative is the fact that the folks around the table and those of us at home on Zoom, we now know each other and have the ability to potentially work together because of this committee. So I think that's important to build into the narrative that we're going to present to the city too, because that's not insignificant. And the second piece, I agree with Robin on this. I sit on the Legacy Committee and the Arts and Culture Committee. And what I can already see happening is we have to figure out how to better define who's doing what, because there's going to be a lot of tripping in all good intent. It's not bad, but I don't think the 400 needs yet another group saying we're going to do this. So if we just take off, I think Larry said it, the 400 and talk about doing something together collaboratively, like I started out saying, those of us who didn't know each other before, who now can pick up the phone and say, hey, what do you think? Because of this committee. I don't know how I can stress that enough, how this has been important to me for that reason.
Good points.
Just for clarity, Larry didn't say that.
That was Jason. Jason said, but that's okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna suggest maybe for where it says collaborative community, you could say new and current, so that we've got both things that are starting out and things that are already going.
So additionally, in recommendations, there isn't one about whether we're recommending this committee to continue.
Oh, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Okay,
That's
good.
2 more bullet points ahead.
Russ, before we
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
on, one thing that I wonder is if this group can help reinforce other critical initiatives that the city needs to be looking at. Affordable housing is one that came up in our first survey that we did back in, the springtime. Is that one of the issues for workforce shortages, artists being able to live here in Portsmouth is the lack of affordable housing. And I think still being in the pandemic, one of the things you just see every day, read in the news, every place, is the workforce shortage issues that are just, such a major issue in all parts of our country. So if there's anything we can do to emphasize that we as a committee feel that the city needs to be putting more efforts into, or more plans into addressing the issue of affordable housing as a step towards helping issues with workforce shortages.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Tina. I think something like that really is going to take some, concentrated effort, specific thinking on the topic, might be the type of thing that could get adopted to a cultural plan within the city. It's interesting, the cultural plan from 20 years ago didn't address housing for artists, didn't address housing for the creative economy workers or anything like that. The closest it came, and I don't know, Nancy might be able to clarify. I know ArtSpeak spent a significant amount of time talking about artist live workspace. I don't know if that was included in the actual cultural plan.
It was included in the original cultural plan as just additional venues for emerging artist performance. It was kind of wrapped around that idea.
Yeah.
But a lack of space, but happily, that's one of the things that's happened since that plan.
Yes.
But I think there's still a need.
Well, it's interesting, something explicitly stated in the cultural plan, such as venue space and opportunities for artists to be able to present the community has come to fruition, but something not explicitly mentioned in the cultural plan, live workspace and affordable space, hasn't come to fruition. So it's a question of whether or not including something like that in a cultural plan that could be potentially adopted into the city master plan could have some impact on moving that idea forward within the community. Because I remember in my early years on the ArtSpeak board, there was a lot of work and conversation about the idea of affordable live workspace for artists, particularly visual artists, but for all types of artists. We talked about poets, we talked about musicians, we talked about dancers, we talked about theater artists and creating, and there were even some community projects that were put forth and presented to us by developers that had the potential to have artists live workspace in portions of the new developments that never came to be. So I think that's an important topic. You're right, it came out of those early surveys. I don't know how I would phrase it as an ask or a recommendation in your report, other than including it in one of many reasons why we feel the city should move forward with a cultural plan or cultural plan process.
Yeah.
So the question that I have is, with the acquisition of the community center and lands, right?
Yep.
Is there any way to make a specific request that as people are looking at how that should be developed, the consideration should be given both in terms of affordable housing and perhaps specifically, arts workspace?
That's a good question.
I mean, it's an amazing opportunity. And Nancy, how much land is there that comes with that?
30 acres,
30 acres. So
Isn't, how much of the 30 acres is undeveloped?
30 acres.
There's 30 undeveloped acres.
I believe that's, I believe, but don't quote me on it.
Okay,
Can I just circle back to the idea? of-
please.
It's, clearly the workforce housing, affordable housing, however you want, that's defined by percentage of income. It's so complicated and could take up, all of this, and the learning curve is really steep. Yeah, but that what can be done is really challenging. I would just encourage this group to, not step out of the way, but be a voice for advocacy and also be a sounding board because you're employers.
Yep.
And so I just caution you, just because as long as I've been around here, it seems like this has been a circular conversation. It's really a tough nut to crack, and I think there's responsibilities at legislative level all around, but I just would encourage caution about that and just meaning where you feel you can have the most impact. I think it's important, as I said, because you're employers.
Well, being cognizant of the limited time that we have today, the last 3 bullet points on here is support for, or direct support to independent local artists through artist relief grants. And that's something that we want to talk more about and have more clarity and definition on. And we just talked about the cultural plan, and we would like to, I think we would like as a group, and we can talk about that, to recommend the creation of a new cultural plan, which I think is probably a process that would take 2 years to complete, beginning to end, totally, to go through the whole thing. So, to Courtney's question about the extension of this committee, there is some support at the city council level for making this a permanent committee. I think I've voiced this in the past. I haven't, I'll voice it now, that I think probably the best course of action would be to extend the Blue Ribbon Committee with enough time to do a cultural plan and allow a cultural plan to decide what happens in the future. And rather than just a sitting city council or mayor say, we're going to have this new committee, have actual listening sessions throughout the community that involve all the stakeholders, community members, our government, our arts organizations, the artists in the community, and the end result of the culture plan should present to us what the community feels like is right for whether or not there should be an arts commission or a committee or whatever form that takes in the future. That's what happened last time 20 years ago. And I think we have a lot to learn from the past 20 years in the first cultural plan and a lot of information that we can use. So I think that the recommendation, and I would love to hear others' opinions on this, but I think the recommendation that's logical to me would be to keep a Blue Ribbon Committee for 2 more years and leave it at that, and not say this is going to be a permanent committee, because we don't have any structure for what a permanent committee would be. We don't have a vision for what that committee would mean, how it would have to be staffed, how it would have to be funded, what the workload would be and what we're doing. I think all of that would be determined by a cultural plan. So any thoughts on that before we move on to the next part of the agenda?
is that smart?
I
I like it. Yeah.
So find this, I'm gonna stop sharing there. And next on the agenda, I believe, is the marketing update. So I do want to make sure we have time for everything else. I will say to wrap that other conversation before we go to marketing, that Barbara and I are already started a Google document where we're creating and drafting the plan, start to give people access to that and start to ask questions and start to populate that so that it's all done and submitted before our next meeting in 2 weeks. Okay. All right, Ben, you're up.
Yep, sorry, I thought it was 1 o'clock, I was just canceling. Okay, sorry, so, I brought a couple printed copies, of some documents. There's like twice the number of people that are usually here, so you may have to, you know, from 6 feet apart there. I'm gonna send a couple, this way, I'm gonna send a couple that way.
Can we make them copy?
If you, that would be good.
I have one on my. I'm good.
I have it pulled up. There's 2 documents.
I've got.
So, well, thank you. We are, there's 2 documents. One says from Darcy Creative, one says from Sullivan Communications. And those really are our 2 partners in this initiative from the Chamber's contracting standpoint. So just to introduce the 2 entities, Sullivan Communications is a PR firm based out of Boston, who we have worked with for many, many years to do public relations work and media outreach for the community. She's had a lot of success in placing articles and having media come to town. And we also partner with the state tourism office as well, so we'll reach out to them separately. And that's another deal. And then Darcy Creative is our local advertising partner that we have worked with many, many times in the past to do outreach and creative campaigns and things like that. So the 2 things that we're looking at today are really strategy documents. That we are not to the point where we have creative yet or have ads to look at or anything like that. These are strategy documents. And the strategy really comes in start with Darcy's document, if you will, Darcy Creative's document. So, you know, we plan to use a mixture of digital and streaming video and a little bit of print advertising to accomplish what we're trying to do here with some pretty aggressive Google AdWords work after that, which is not really effective in here because I guess that's a third partner, if you will. We have another agency, Centrist Digital, that does our Google AdWords advertising to the tune of about $10,000 a month that we get. And we would dedicate a significant portion of this. Something to note is that we have been able to actually increase, I don't think it's reflected in these documents, increase our advertising budget a little bit. We have some state funding that was dedicated to the fall restaurant week for tourism promotion that we were able to reallocate since restaurant week did not happen. We were able to move some of those dollars over here. So I think that's somewhere in the 3,000-ish range that we were able to kind of pull over and add into this budget that may not be reflected in this document. One of the biggest questions is when, and it seems to be the consensus of these professionals that we hold off in marketing until February 1st launch date. Just given the sort of the trajectory that we're on with the COVID numbers right now, we don't think there's a lot that can be gained with you know, hitting a lot of advertising in January. So we want to let that peak and die down a little bit. That being said, we will start the PR work beforehand. So we will be reaching out to writers. That's a long process. You have to have 5 conversations before they even agree to consider the story. So that work will start in January and hopefully be ready to go as we get a little further along. So the advertising campaign, you can see the details there. I'm not going to go through every line item there, but we will be using a lot of digital advertising through streaming TV channels, which really allow us to fine tune exactly the demographic we're going after. And you can see the sample report of where that information, how detailed you can get there. We can pick is streaming through, exactly what channels we want. There's a list of ones up there that we think would be most appropriate. We are going to be applying, thank you, for some PSAs, which would be free advertising on that as well. That's a process that's ongoing. We had a little strategy session. Who should make that ask, and it looks like the Chamber Collaborative will be doing that. We will be using some paid social media, Facebook, Instagram primarily, to get that message out there. And Google Display, Google Ads. So I think where was it? Graphics. There we go. Thank you. That's what I was really hoping to. I couldn't find it. We are focusing on a 60-mile radius of Portsmouth. The interests are no-brainers: cultural arts, music and arts. Slightly geared a little bit more towards the female demographic. We're going to capture off of some of the momentum we have as a community about our restaurant scene, so we'll focus on those folks a little bit as well. But that 25 to 64-year-old demographic is who we're going to. So you'll hopefully that areas with who we should be going after. So like I said, Darcy is going to start next on the creative side of this. So we have asked her for a wish list of video assets and photography assets and things like that that can be incorporated into this overall branding campaign. So hopefully we'll get that, and we will be reaching out to all the arts entities to see what exists already. I'm sure there's great photos out there and great video out there that everyone has, and we want to work with you to capture things that may not exist. So we'll be in touch with the local arts community about that, for-profit, nonprofit, you name it, everyone. Any questions about the advertising spend?
How are we gonna measure whether or not it's effective?
So the beauty of the digital advertising is everything's tracked, right? Every minutia and every second and every click, every hover is tracked. So it'll be a very detailed report prepared monthly as to how much traffic comes back to the landing pages, which is a whole separate issue on GoPortsmouthNH.com. So there'll be an arts and culture section on that page that'll be populated with all the events calendars. To your point recently earlier, that is where we can make sure every event, every music hall event, every 3S event has a link to their COVID protocols, so that it'd be unrealistic for us to have all that information on our page because it probably changes somewhat regularly. But we can have a link on every event calendar page with information to the different venues or whatever have you, COVID protocols, so that all that information is nice and available for folks. So we will be tracking incoming to our site and then outgoing to really your sites and other community resources. So if it's going to the Button Factory or to WSCA, whatever it is, we can track everything going out from our site to those sites. And it's up to us to work with you all to make sure that it is a really rich site with all the content that we need. We have some mock-up pages coming together already. We'll be reaching out to make sure that that is really populated in a strong way.
So is that a new page then? I mean, or
It's yes, I mean, it's all going to be new. We have like a little something now. It's not nearly adequate for what we're talking about.
okay.
So this will be a redeveloped page. It's very pretty and engaging and probably have some video asset associated with it as well. So yeah, it'll be new content. So we'll be tracking everything coming in and going out to the end user, which is all the entities.
Yeah, I have a question about the age demographic.
Yep.
And I don't know enough about, this advertising business to know if that's like a normal growth point for advertising, like up to 64. Or did we set that? And my reason for asking is that we found more and more that just slightly older than that is where a lot of money is for spend,
Sure.
particularly on art and other things like that. So I understand the desire to get a young thing, which is critically important, but I just from the experience of the art association, I know there's like a category just slightly higher than that where there's a significant amount of spend.
And on that level of detail, I probably would have to go back to Darcy, and I'm happy to bring that back to her and ask her about that, because this is her strategy, and I, like you, am not the marketing expert. It may have something to do with the fact that, you know, just, I'm gonna say something that I'm gonna regret, so I'll move on. It may have to do with the age demographic being on these platforms. You know, like it may be that the social media tends to be that 64 and under age, so I don't, yeah.
I would bet though that a lot of these television stations are in the demographic that Renee is talking about.
Right.
I know my parents are, so.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I was trying, I
love you, Mom
I
and
wasn't
Dad.
trying to.
I just know that when my friends come to town, they're like piled up with a bunch of stuff they buy here and come back, so, you know, and they go out, and there are a lot of them are older than this,
I will bring that up,
Yeah,
make sure we address that, and I'll get back to you. And then moving on to the Sullivan Communications document.
I have a question
Oh, sorry.
about timeline
Sure.
again, and I hate to be the squeaky wheel on
Yeah.
this, but so we've now bumped outside the holiday timeline, which we had originally thought was gonna be an effective timeline for all the events. Now we're in February to April 30. To me, this feels a little bit like if you bumped it 1 month to May 30, you could then start advertising for things that are happening in the summer season, as opposed to a little bit of a dead zone with February. And yes, the festival also only exists in the summer, but I think that the summer season here is when we're in full bloom, so it makes sense from a strategic standpoint, especially given a pilot, to have some numbers that you could tie to that, because we'll be in full swing for our membership drive at this point. But I think you miss an opportunity with the full month of May to have all of these organizations and summer.
A lot of that I can't dispute, you know, a lot of that is spot on, so, we were operating under the assumption, that there was a desire to get going as soon as possible, without being foolish and starting too soon and like being insensitive to the numbers of COVID right now and things like that. So that's where I have no concern. It's your project. You know, we are merely facilitators of that for you. So if it's the group desire, certainly I'd want to just go back and confer with, you know, the team here. But I have no objection to that. And I think you've made a lot of great points. My only concern, and this is my only concern with even waiting to February, is if there is to be an ask for additional long-term funding, and we are going to hang our hat on the success of this pilot project, I don't know when that we need the data of the success to ask for the funding. So I'd hate to, if decisions are being made about future funding in, say, March, and we're 2 weeks into this campaign, we have no way to say, hey, we're really good at this, you should give us more money so that we can keep doing this. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that was my only concern, is like getting started sooner so that we had some data, even if it's just a month or two, under our belt, so that we can say, hey, we can do this really well and we're moving the needle. We would like to have additional funding to do this for a longer period of time. That's my only hesitation. I have no idea, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the city, but I don't think they know what the timing of that looks like. And Nancy, I mean, the ARPA funding timeline really hasn't come together, has it?
No.
Okay, so that's my only.
Yeah, I think we'd be advocating for May being a continuation of this and there not being a break in it. So the risk would be that the city would not fund it, and that would end April 30th if we started on February 1st, and it would be a 3-month campaign that was an attempt to pilot something that didn't receive continued funding. So my hope would be that in some capacity it would be continued beyond April 30th. And I do think that if we push it too far along, I'm not sure how the city council cycle works as far as doing asks, but it feels like if we started in February, that by mid-March with some data, that might be when data would be needed for a continued funding ask. I don't know.
It all depends. I mean, if you're talking about the city general budget, I mean, that starts right after the new year. They
Yeah.
start planning for that. But I think you've identified ARPA funds
ARPA, yeah.
for this. And I shouldn't say that no planning has been done, because I think there's there's gonna be some ARPA funds used for the community campus.
Yep.
And so, but I think there will be some residual, and our $12 million that we got is coming in 2 tranches, 6 this year, 6 next year, so. And I just think it's good to get out. I think this is a really good time to put it out there in your report to this council, and you will have the council elect watching this as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
So maybe after that, it's probably worth a conversation with Karen.
So I guess the question would be to Darcy and the subgroup that's working on this particular project is how nimble can we be in adjusting in between February 1st and March 1st based on information that we get from the city in January? So that late in the game, because I think it's going to be after January 3rd when the new council is seated that we're probably going to first start to get information on the timing of things. That would be my guess.
And I don't think their first real meeting is till the latter part of January.
Okay.
And I don't know, Ben, what if you didn't spend as much for some of those springtime months or some of the early months that we gave you an opportunity to spend a little less, maybe 1 or 2 months, so you can stretch it out through May.
I'm betting there's arguments that could be made on both sides, so I would rely on the expertise of Darcy and her team and the sub people that are working on this based on the information that's been given to you today and figure out from there. So I think these are all good points. But the
Can
hope
I-
is to continue it.
Russ?
Yeah, go ahead.
Russ,
Yes, go ahead, Barbara.
sorry, Robin said something about, after kicking off, was it March, Robin?
Yeah, the surveys are gonna begin in March, but we're gonna be
Okay.
doing meetings in January and February.
Gotcha. So is there any value, and this is to the committee to consider, is there any value to even moving it out to March so that all these things are kind of happening at the same time, creating some kind of energy around it? Just a thought.
I feel like they're kind of unrelated, yeah. It's kind of an apples and oranges situation, so I'm not too concerned about that. I think that Courtney's got a really good point about timing of the art cycle and participatory audiences and where things happen within the cycle and getting a jump on the summer. And I think Ben's got an excellent point about getting data back as quickly as possible with potential for future funding. So I think at this point, we'd send him back to Darcy and the team with that information and have them make an expert recommendation on what they think makes the most sense.
So, sorry.
I've lost track of this, what's the price?
So the entire pilot project is $51,000. The advertising spend itself is 32.
Around 32.
32 is part of the 50.
Yes,
Yes.
that's part of the
Yes,
50.
it's all part of it. So just to move on, and really going on to the solid communications document. So this is a bit of a draft format, so and I would kind of ignore that first paragraph. I kind of intended to take that out and forgot. But anyways, but really just to show that there's a very robust plan on the PR side, and this is traditionally where we have had success as a community in getting ourselves on the map, if you will. It's the writers who bring to town, it's the stories that get published in the magazines and the different publications. This is really where we've had a lot of good work done. And Solid Communications has been doing that in connection with the state. So focusing on the Drive Market area, focusing on where C&J goes, the Allegiant stops. This will be the first time that we've actually had money in a budget where we could actually pay for a flight if we needed to, or we're always kind of begging for hotel rooms and dinners and stuff, but if we could actually afford stuff, this is great. So it's kind of a game changer in this regard. So I think we'll have a lot of success in bringing people to town for writers. So you can see a whole long list of publications that, this is sort of an initial list of folks they want to reach out to and are already planning on doing that. So a lot of great work there. And we will again be partnering with the state on this as well. So next steps on this is our PR agent would really like to have a meeting with the arts community. She needs to get these stories, ideas in her head, so that when she's talking to these different writers, she is very well informed and knowledgeable about what's going on, and can really inspire them to want to come and visit. So she's looking for an in-person meeting. We will be hosting a tourism summit coming up on February 2nd or 3rd, I forget which now, 2nd, thank you. That could perhaps take place after that. Because I know she will be there for that. So that's something to consider.
Did you say January?
February.
February.
So Ben, I think in the PR angle of things, that might be when Senator Clark's idea about messaging, safety protocols, it's time to come back. Those types of ideas would really come into play at some capacity. It may not be the main message,
Right.
but it would be a component of the messaging in a PR campaign.
I agree 100%. And I think informing Martha Sullivan and her team about what everyone has taken, and so she can speak knowledgeably to that. Because I would venture to guess that there's going to be writers and folks with concerns themselves about going to different things. So if we can be informed, inform her, and that would be the next step.
Copy of this one. We have these.
He sent it to Barbara and I, and it hasn't been circulated yet, it will be circulated
Okay, great,
today.
thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is the tourism summit's February 2nd?
Yes.
So you're planning on starting the project?
I was kind of thinking off the top of my head, we might need to do a virtual thing prior to that, maybe a second one after that. It's a good one.
Okay.
This is what happens when I think on my feet, it's not a good process.
Other comments for Ben or thoughts?
I had one more, related to how we'll know if the project is successful. I understand that we get a lot of information, digital advertising, marketing, but I think it'd be good to determine a threshold for success. I think it might be useful for us to have some industry benchmarks to understand what we should expect from this project and how to know if it's really benefiting all of our organizations. Otherwise, I'm worried we might just get a lot of numbers. And for measuring visits to our organization's websites, I'm sure those will go up, but it's hard to determine if that is a successful investment. In other words, like how, another way of thinking it is, how badly would it have to be for us to say it wasn't a success?
Geez.
And how do you translate
I'm not
going to
expecting
your
that.
website to buy a ticket?
Right, so it's tough, because we're not gonna be able to track to the end, like, did they eventually buy a ticket or did they eventually buy a painting or something, that's kind of, that'd be very hard to do. There are industry metrics, I have no idea what they are, but, we can say, with these digital campaigns, what's been successful, what hasn't, what is the return on that investment. All that is, there's wizardry in the marketing world that make those numbers, make sense. On the PR side of things, there's a pretty easy formula to put a number on that. So, for example, we had a article in a Canadian publication that had 6 million views. And they put a value of $350,000 on that. So that's just one article. So if we can land a couple of those, we can really demonstrate that this generated a lot of good marketing value for us. It gets really, with this kind of campaign, it's that rising tide, analogy that's lifting all boats. It is hard to measure that, because we are not directly promoting a specific artist or a specific venue. We are promoting Portsmouth as an arts and culture destination. So we need to have some confidence in that. This will be good, and we'll have the data to back it up, but tracking it down to the end user in a sale is going to be tough.
That all makes sense. I guess the question left is there any scenario in which we wouldn't recommend perpetuation of this program? Are we going into this definitely sure that we're doing a pilot and then we're going to recommend that the city?
I mean, I would hope that the worst case scenario is that we learn a lot about how to improve it going forward. I mean, I think this is essential for our city going going forward for all of our entities to be able to support the artists and our workforce. And so I think it's what do we learn from it? How do we do it better? And I don't think I've said this yet or offered this thought, but I think we're gonna have to ask for much more marketing dollars than what has been put in here. I think this is only gonna give us just a little bit of insight in terms of the reach that these dollars can have and how much further you can reach bigger or larger audiences with more financial support.
That's where I think the after results tie directly to that.
So two quick comments. One, we are, and I haven't said this, we are going to ask for our partners to be active in this. You know, if we can provide these assets to you. So everyone has a reach on Instagram, and a reach on Facebook, and a reach on all their channels, you know, or you know, if we can put it on the playbill or whatever it is, you know, whatever, how can we use your reach to further this message? So we will be putting together a toolkit for our partners that has ads and copy and you name it, you know, all the collateral pieces, so that, you know, you can put it in your email signature, whatever you can do to help, we're gonna ask you to do it. So that I think will be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember that this is a step one of a marketing campaign, right? This is the awareness stage,
Yeah.
which is kind of what you were saying. It's not a closed business because of this touch. You know, you have to touch people multiple times and raise awareness, and it's entirely likely that you wouldn't see sales of this until the summer, because people will see it in February, March and say, oh yeah, that's a place I want to go to. You know, so it's very difficult.
And to Tina's comment earlier, you know, we've been promoting Restaurant Week as an example for a long time. And we have fine-tuned that system really, really well over that time. And we're really effective with that. So, you know, I think we're gonna hit this pretty strong. And I think we will make improvements over time, even throughout the campaign. You know, after 3 weeks or 2 weeks, where we look at, you know, they're gonna do some A/B campaigns so that we can say, hey, A is performing better than B, let's drop B and stick with A, or whatever have you, or maybe A is working with a certain demographic. You know, we will be doing all that throughout the.
I mean, the point really is it's a pilot, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not.
Yeah, pilots are never perfect.
Right, exactly. I mean, the idea is to do this and find out what you need to know.
One of the things I jotted down earlier was thinking about partnering our group to partner with Legion or C&J Bus, or talk to some of the major hotels in town to say, where are you targeting your marketing dollars in terms of geography? What's the demographics that you're shooting for? Where are you doing those targeted advertising dollars, so that we can double down, if you will, on our use of our dollars, maybe not for this pilot project, but going forward, I really think we need to get some more synergies going.
Yeah, it gets, you know, even if you just take Legion as an example, you know, if we added those destinations, that's when you're talking the need for serious money.
Yep.
You know, there's no way with this kind of budget could we reach the 1.5 hour, 2 hour drive market, and then, you know, Nashville alone would gobble up like 4 times this budget.
Right.
You know, so we're really talking like yeah, exactly.
But your thinking is fantastic in terms of, you know, being able to amplify.
Right.
From a PR side of things, we've done that recently. Like we had a food writer from Orlando come because of the Legion, right? So they had a nice 4-page spread in an edible Orlando magazine. So we will be doing that from the PR side.
So do we know what the Jazz Club is doing now to promote its new venue here, and how we might pull them in to work with all of us? Just a question, you know, they're looking at trying to bring top-notch performers from all over the country. It could change the makeup of who comes here. How do we take advantage of that or work with them?
I think Suzanne Brissette would be a really good person to speak to about that, and she's been talking about wanting to reach out to the business community as well. is the creative part of the business community.
So we have a great relationship with the management team and ownership team of Jimmy's, and they are aware of what we're doing. And I've spoken directly with Peter about it a number of times, and we will be bringing them into the conversation.
Cool. All right, we're running very long today, so
Sorry.
it's not your fault. It's not your fault, so don't worry about that. I do want to wrap things up. The one clarification that I want to make sure that we include publicly in this meeting is that because this is a city-funded project and it's spearheaded by this committee, that the landing page on the chamber site for arts and culture, and you alluded to this in the the types of organizations you listed that could potentially be referenced in there. It's not going to be chamber member exclusive. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that that's clear with the community that this is really an effort to address challenges being faced by the entire arts and culture community of Portsmouth, and Ben and his team at the chamber are doing an excellent job of making sure that that is the case. So hearing Button Factory and places like that that aren't traditional chamber members being included in this process, I think is very important. And I think their city councilors are going to want to hear that. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
We did have a very specific conversation, just
Yeah.
exactly that.
No, I know, and I'm really happy that you're addressing it. And I want to be as transparent and clear as possible to the community in our meetings about that. Because we're so short on time, is it okay if we postpone any discussion after? Do you have one or two things you want to mention?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, go for
I don't know
it.
if you want to go in anywhere.
Yeah, that's okay. I think you distributed out to me, if I'm not mistaken, to this committee, a spreadsheet.
I don't know if I got that in time, so maybe not.
It'll come.
Yeah,
Okay,
it'll come up.
it'll come to you. So what we've done, the committee has done is go through, so after, you all know what after is, right? We've got to get the right, we're in the stage now of building the right list of organizations that will participate. So we took what we had, 5 or 6 years ago and have updated it to the best of our ability as a committee. But what we'd like you to do is look over it, and where you have more current information than what we have here about the contacts of an organization, what the title of that person is, the email, please let us know so we can update the spreadsheet. And secondly, if there are any organizations that you know of that are not on here that maybe have come into an existence recently that we should, consider being part of the organizations that we survey, please let us know that as well.
And it's not solely Portsmouth, right?
No, it's Portsmouth, Kittery, and Rye. The Google spreadsheet is live, so you can go right out to the spreadsheet. There's also a paragraph that's a definition of what organizations may participate. So that goes beyond 501c3s. So you may come up with some organizations that are a little bit different, but still we're looking for organizations that have audiences.
Yeah.
So as
Yeah.
opposed to maybe just, somebody who's teaching something after school. So that's-
Right. We want audiences where people would be spending money there and in other places if they go to it, that kind of thing.
And then real quickly, just calendar wise, we're gonna have a Zoom, an introductory Zoom meeting in January that will invite everybody on this list so that people understand what AFTA is. Then in February, we'll have 2 meetings, one in person and one Zoom with the same agenda, which is gonna be a training. So that's more how to do this. But we're gonna do a January one and just, I know we're rushing. Because of the people on our committee, it would be best if that Zoom is in the afternoon as opposed to the morning. I've always felt that you start your morning with something and then you go to work. It's easier, it's harder to get you to stop what you're doing and do something at 4 o'clock. So I'm not sure how you all feel about that, but we may need to do that.
Yeah, we want to know what do you think we have the best chance of getting, at what time of day do you think we have the best chance of getting an audience of people who will participate?
And you're talking about people who are in arts organizations.
Yeah,
Correct.
and the-
Who are
the people on that
focal
list.
point, the people on this list who are the focal points for those organizations. Do you have a strong feel?
Does the training have to be something that people attend as it's happening, or can they change? it?
No, so again, what Robin was saying is the first thing will be a Zoom meeting in January. And that's with all these contacts, and that will tell them this is the AFTA study, because some of these people probably don't know. you know, this is how it works. You will be receiving a survey. We will expect you to do this, but it won't be actually training on the specific survey because we won't have that yet.
I think
They'll have
Nico's
on
curious
Sunday.
if it'll be recorded and then people can watch it after the fact.
Yeah,
I guess the actual training, we could probably do both. Yeah, we could probably do both. I mean, the actual training session then in February will be some of that same information, but go into more depth. And we could certainly, that would be both in person or Zoom, depending on.
I think the key is just advance notice. So if if it happens in the mid-afternoon versus the morning, the more advanced notice, the better for people to actually show up is probably.
Because the January one will be, they're not even sending us all our materials to February.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
And just this really quickie, parenthetically, when AFTA responded to a question we had, they said that they will be sending us a QR code version of the survey.
Oh, okay.
yeah, which is really good.
That's
So
good.
that's very new and means that maybe people can take out their phone. So we're not exactly sure, but that was just a little aside in my missing it from him, so.
Excellent.
I'm glad.
Hey, Russ, just so you know, I forwarded that list to everybody.
Okay, good. Thank you, Barbara.
It's a very interesting definition of who can participate. That is not 501c3.
Okay, all right, good to know.
Thanks, Russ.
Well, no, I really appreciate everyone's patience. I know it's a bit of a marathon meeting for us compared to recent meetings, but I think there was a lot of important stuff that we covered. Is there anything anyone wanted to mention in parting that we haven't discussed or wanted to chime in on before we adjourn? All right, expect a flurry of discussion online and be prepared for that about the year-end report. Thank you all for your time. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Could you say you did it again?
Yes, on December 20th.